Welcome to Unpolished Stories. This is a podcast aiming to go beyond the spotlight, examining the role of professional speakers and what goes on off stage, what leads us to the points we are when we share that, what comes with those stories that often you hear on stage, but there's so much more behind those moments that we share with you. So it is my pleasure to be here again with Chantelle. This is our next episode in the series in all sorts of conversations with Chantelle, right? Interesting people from all over the world. It's been so much fun. Chantelle, as we get started today, you and I've had some recent conversation around how when speakers take the stage, not only are they representing, right, their own experiences, but they're representing so many people who help them get to that spot, right? What does that make you think of as we get into today's conversation?
Oh, they say it takes a village to raise a child. I say it takes the world to raise a speaker.
Right? All those
Right.
experiences, right, that come to the stage, so many stories that we carry with us. Have you ever had that experience where you're not, you're trying to decide which story to tell because there's so many we bring with us?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this is the thing that unites us as speakers. We've spoken about it hundreds of times, or maybe not quite hundreds of times, but we keep coming back to we are people first. We're humans first. And humans have stories. And we use these stories to weave them across into our lessons and to start bringing our message to the stages that we represent. But I think as part of that, those stories, it makes the audience see us as humans. But what it also does is it creates that connection, which creates this feeling of safety in the audience. And this is why I'm really excited about our guest today, because we've just been bantering a little bit off camera on the importance of this feeling of belonging, this feeling safe in a room, right?
We know from the research around that when we feel safe, we're more likely to learn something or receive something. So what is our role as speakers to not only represent the stories well, right? All those people who came on stage with us, but to then create that environment where people feel safe to learn and safe to explore those ideas we're sharing. Yeah, I'm excited. So we're not gonna hold it up any longer. I love your point about that. We've been having this conversation with our speaker today, and we're just delighted to bring her to this conversation. So it is my pleasure to welcome Traci Ruiz today to this. And for those of you who have not met Traci yet, I want you to know a couple of things about her as we get into this conversation. She has been highly recognized as a high stakes leadership expert with over 25 years of experience in law enforcement and as one of the highest ranking Latina police officers in the United States. Traci was the only woman of color in Michigan training officers in combat and de-escalation for nearly 2 decades. I'm betting she's got some stories for us, right? It is
Oh, and I
throughout this.
cannot wait.
I know it is this impressive career that she brought with her then too, through those pioneering roles, such as first police officer on Michigan's governor's board of medicine. And, all these stories she's brought with her, all the people she's representing is now coming to stage and in groups across the world. She is empowering leaders to make fast, decisive choices under pressure. And she's had some experience do that. So we're going to share with you her contact information so that you can connect with her on LinkedIn and really learn more about her own stories beyond today's podcast and her transformative approach to representing those voices and then to helping others feel safe to learn in it. Traci, welcome. It's so good to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Celina, and thank you, Chantelle. It's a pleasure being here.
Chantelle, why don't you
Such a
start us off
pleasure.
with your first question?
Well, Tracy, when I was reading your bio and just doing a little bit of research in preparation for this chat, I got this impression that there's a strong leader that we're about to be sitting in front of, and there must be some sort of story of personal resilience. Now, what I'd like to hear from you is, and of course, this is just curiosity, in your public safety career, I'm pretty sure you must have faced a high stakes situation that was almost a watershed moment that changed you as a person, but also as a leader, and that prefaced your work as a speaker. Could you maybe share that story with us?
I think it goes back more so to youth. I was born and raised in a typical extended Mexican household with grandparents and my aunts and my father and my aunts and uncles and cousins, within, next door in the same neighbor. When we say same neighborhood as Americans, no, they're really in the backyard and they're next door. That's how we were raised. And so I think because of that unconditional love and strong foundation, it allowed my cousins and I were the second generation to America. We were what's considered the spoiled generation. We never had to pick, in the field, we were never migrant workers. So we were afforded a better life because our parents and our grandparents had worked so hard to get to that level and make sure that we could have a better life here. So I think back to youth and I really attribute all of my successes to my family. When you talk about it takes a village to raise a child, really I had a strong village of people around me and supporting me. And the comical part is that I knew at 15 years old I wanted to be a police officer. I was mesmerized by Charlie's Angels. That was a big TV show. I thought it was just really cool. And my grandmother was asking me in Spanish, she's like, oh, please no, please no. She would tell me, mija, I need you to be a nurse. And I'm like, no, grandma, I can't be a nurse. And she's like, no, you can. And I'm like, no, I don't like needles. I can't be a nurse. Like, it's not going to be a good thing. But she was really afraid, I think more so because in our Latin culture, you really don't let the kids stray far. So it was a big deal that, being raised, my grandma made food for everybody. If I brought over 10 people, 12 people, grandma always had fresh tortillas and food to put on the table. But heaven forbid if you ask to go stay the night somewhere else or go to your friend's house because she's like, you bring your friends here. So then going off into a police job where you're making split second decisions, you're really putting your life out on the line there for other people. And you're also protecting people as well as protecting their voices, right? So I look at it as it was a huge honor. There wasn't really a pivotal moment, I would say, in my career, but before so, as a teenager, I was raised in a police department where I found a program that it's called the Police Explorers, and it's youths who think they want to become police officers. And we have monthly meetings, and we would go to mini police academies in the summer, stay in barracks and military barracks. And that was really my first exposure to going somewhere else where you're really in competition. Everything was that physical competition. We had shooting competitions. There were several competitions, and it was fun because I would fall back on my sports, my athleticism. And that's really what helped break those barriers. It really wasn't about color. Yes, when I went into my career, that's when you really learned about the prejudice or people having certain bias. I never saw that at home because my grandparents were so open to it. Didn't matter who I brought home as long as they were good people. So I would say, to answer your question, a pivotal moment in my career might have been on a police call, how I got involved with, we call it subject control. And I was one of our subject control instructors. And what that is it's the hand-to-hand combat, your defensive tactics, your fight skills. That's what I had trained our police officers in over nearly 2 decades. And so all of my partners were typically white males, 240, 230, 270 pounds. And there was me as the solo woman of color for nearly 2 decades. So we had other women, just no women of color. So hopefully that, to answer your question, that's a little teaser into, there was a police call that was that pivotal moment for me to then become a subject control instructor.
As you talk about some of your, family stories and what brought you to this work, I would imagine that was an amazing grounding for you, right? That core piece of who we are and how that develops in us. It makes me think about leadership today, right? In high stress environments can be really intense. And I have no doubt you experienced that many ways over the years. and had to also learn how to manage your own stress and emotions to be able to stay resilient. Tell us a little bit more about how you developed those techniques for yourself, and how have those now translated to the stage for you or working with groups? What do you share with folks about staying resilient?
Absolutely. There are many tips that I could give, but one of the biggest ones is sports. That was really my foundation. If I could be in the gym, that's my happy place. And so that was always part of my regiment. And even when I taught in the police academy for nearly 2 decades as well, and I would teach them their fight skills to the police recruits as well as physical fitness. So when we were there, we do chants, and I'd have them chant strong mind, strong body, strong mind while we're running. And thinking back to those memories when I was growing up, that athleticism or sports kind of puts you on a even level or even playing field, because if you can rise in sports, people don't look at the color necessarily or the gender. So when I was in the police department, yes, there were definitely prejudice for sure when I walked in. And it was a very unique situation back then because there were few women that chose to have families and children. And so when I hired on the police department, I went in the locker room, there was a lot of LGBTQIA with the women, they were openly gay. Men, not so. The men didn't talk about that. That was very hidden. So I went into a field where I'm in the locker room with some of the comments that are going on, and then I'm going into lineup, and then I was getting hit on by my training officer who was a male. So it was like from one end to the other. I wasn't raised in a family. We were very religious in our family. So I wasn't raised with I learned a lot. Let's just put it that way. The first couple of months at work, oh, it was a eye-opening experience. And I thought, wow, I worked so hard to try to get my degree in college, in a 4-year degree, and there is nothing those books can teach you that you were going to learn on the job. It was a trial by fire. Does that answer your question?
Does. There's so many things in there of just lessons learned around resilience and finding your inner strength, finding that
Yes.
core to you. And even listeners and watchers of this podcast, it may not be athletics for them, but I think your message is really clear. And find your thing, right? Find
Yes.
that thing that's gonna help keep you strong and resilient in the moments you need it the most, whether it's a faith-based, whether it's physical activity, whether it's some other core set of values or experiences. I think about that coming out of your story. Yeah.
And I appreciate you saying that, Celina, because my grandma would be rolling over in her grave right now that I didn't mention faith first. I said sports, and I should have went back to the faith first, because we were a very faithful family, and God did. He has given me a very good life, and he's watched over me and protected me for many years. And all of the people in my community that were praying, it's such a blessing to be able to go out in the car. And typically for many people around the globe, they don't like police officers, right? Police are not in the same standards or held in the same high standards they are in America in some places. Now, I do appreciate and respect that not everybody has had good contact with the police, so they may have different feelings. But it was such an honor to be able to go out in the community and to be able to serve people. And that was first and foremost. And it's just like the speaker arena. I took an oath several years ago to protect and serve. And we take that for the time that we carry that badge and that gun. And the reality is I took it for life. That's really my firm belief, is that not only did I end police work, once I retired from there, but the speaker, the speaker business was another way that I could protect and serve. And again, I say service first before all else. And so that was a really good feeling to be in that patrol car, where I knew it was a barrier. That uniform and that patrol car were barriers to some people, when at first view, but then when I could get out and talk with them, and the fact that people took me in, and there were so many faith-based people around the community that would say, honey, we got you. We're praying for you. Our church is praying for you. And that touched my heart, because I knew it was genuine and real, that people had my back. I mean, I have several funny stories, several good stories about knockdown, drag out fights. And, there were community members that were right there calling that, 911, getting on the phone or getting right in the thick of things for me.
And just listening to hear you talking about that oath, it sparked a question in me. Traci, you know, you speak about how you've taken this oath to serve. And I look at us as speakers, and so many speakers are so inspired by transformation. We want to see transformation in our clients. We want to leave an audience changed. We want to serve. So maybe I'm going to flip this around a little bit. Let's talk about the audience for a moment. Have you ever experienced perhaps a memorable time or something that stood out for you when a client or an audience member or someone that you served shared a story and this inspired you personally to kind of keep going and sort of change your narrative somewhat, as it were?
Absolutely. You definitely hit a great point, Chantelle. And I'll go back to when I was a hand-to-hand combat instructor. So our police chief, one of my favorite police chiefs ever, Mark Alley, highly respected him. And oh, it was years ago. I want to say maybe 2007, he came to me. And mind you, I was teaching the police recruits at the police academy. And then I was also teaching our police department on these fight skills or hand-to-hand combat de-escalation skills. And he had come to me and he said, Traci, I want you to put together a program for women only. And initially I was offended because we have to work so hard as women and women of color to be able to, it's not an even playing field. It's not at all. You have to work 10 times harder in order to maintain your professional standards. And so he came to me, and at first I took it offensively, like, why? And so I said to him, why are you asking me to just train women? I train men as well. And he said, Traci, trust me on this. We're getting calls from the community. And what's interesting is I had a side business. My side hustle at the time is now my full-time, right, speaking career. But I had a side hustle back then where I was doing women's self-defense, and I was putting together programs for people, safety programs, and for businesses. And so I thought, okay, basically what I'm doing is I'm taking some of this stuff that I'm doing in my personal business outside of the police department, and I'm just going to bring it into the community. And so because I respected him, I did ask him, why are you just asking me to put together this women's program? And so anyways, I trusted him and I said, I will carry out your wishes gladly, so I put on this program, trained up two of the other female officers. So we had three of us, and we had to cap, typically it's one instructor to 24 students. That's really a good, where you can still have one-to-one attention, watch the tactics, making sure their techniques are proper. And so we would take up to like 75. We'd make exception to have a couple more in the room, right? If I had two other instructors. So we put on this first class and we're in there, and, I know the other women are kind of like, yeah, why did we get asked to just do the women? Well, after class, one lady had come up to me and she gave me a hug and she just started bawling and wouldn't let go. I mean, she latched on and she said, I cannot thank you enough for giving me my life back. She said, I have been in my house. She had been a house recluse for 10 years. Someone had broken into her home and she had her shotgun and she actually had to shoot the intruder. And she could never deal with that. So she had been home, afraid to go out. And she said, and I feel like I can kick somebody's ass now. So, I mean, it was like, I mean, it was kind of funny because I don't typically swear, but this lady, in her moment of, just this aha moment where she knows she's safe again, that I could bring that to the stage, so to speak, or to the arena that she was in. And to know that was one story. And then after her, there was another female that came up and talked about a severe rape. She had been a rape victim and a rape survivor. And so she ended up telling her story to me. And this was one-on-one, we didn't call anybody out. We made sure at the very beginning that we'd say we want everybody to be comfortable. So we're not going to ask you personal stories or situations. We want everybody to be at ease right now. This is going to be a fun class. We're going to learn a lot, but we're also going to have fun in the process. So those were two biggies. That was the very first class that we put on. We had a wait list of like 200 people. Women were coming from all over the state because we were the only women, right? Female officers that were putting on. It was solely women instructors. And we had several women that showed and said they would have never gone to a class like that. They would have never taken a class like that with men. And so one led to another, and we would do 4 a year. And the funniest part is, at the time I was working midnight shift and the other girls were on afternoon shift. And these were outside of our duties, right? Our full-time job at that time, I was a patrol supervisor. And So that's our full-time job. And we had people calling the police department complaining. They'd call the chief secretary and yelling, like, I didn't get into that last class and I should have been in it. And people were getting really upset. And it started all this like, fighting amongst the community, like, I need in the next class. And like the secretary's trying to field these calls. And little did the community know we were not full-time training instructors. We didn't have the staffing for that. That was above and beyond what I was working midnight shift by night. I was going to court by day, and then sometimes we would put on these classes, and we've got our own families, we're not sleeping. So that's what people didn't realize. It was kind of cute, but we laughed about it that women were actually calling up, getting angry and saying, I need on the list. And we'd have 200 to 300 people on a wait list. We were training per year. So it ended up being a really good thing. Obviously, I had already been doing that outside in my side hustle, so to speak, at the time. But that was definitely a moment, Chantelle, that I think really hits home to your question.
Amazing.
Go
So
ahead.
I'm gonna,
Go ahead.
can I follow up on this one,
Yes,
Celina?
absolutely.
I love hearing about the history and everything that's shaped you. And I'd like to fast forward and bring it right up to the speaker that you are today. Is there a pivotal moment that has actually shifted you into the speaker that you are today? And how do you apply all of these lessons on stage? I know what you talk about is you talk about high stakes leadership. So these stories are high stakes. They tug at the heartstrings. How do you use this in your stage persona? How can other speakers access that?
Great question. So the first part of your question, it really goes back to, if you think about the Latin culture, for so long, my grandparents had to deal with segregation. They weren't allowed to go into stores. They weren't allowed to use the same restrooms. And they never harped or dwelled on that. It was really, when we were being raised, it was a very loving, love your neighbor, love them as if it was your own family. They didn't talk about, they didn't dwell on the negativity. But I knew just in the little things they were saying, I couldn't imagine growing up where you couldn't go into a bathroom or you couldn't go into a store or a restaurant. And so many times growing up, I remember my grandma saying in Spanish, just be quiet. Don't say a word. And it was instead of like speakers, we use our voice to help other people. This was, and my grandparents they were meaning it as a good thing. They were trying to make sure that we didn't get harmed, because so often they were beat and they had to go through these negative situations, that's all they knew how to say was to be quiet, don't be seen, and don't be heard. And that's really sad, and it's powerful, because if you talk to a lot of not just Latin cultures, but I'm sure other people of color as well, they will tell you similar stories. So while I was growing up, I would see things, my grandma would say, don't say anything, mija, just don't say anything. And I'm like, no, this is wrong. And of course, there's me out there, and she would just be like shaking her head, like, what am I going to do with this child? Because I'm trying to get her to stay quiet. And I'm like, no, this is wrong. And so even growing up in school, grade school, I have many of my same friends. We live in the area that we were raised in. And they will tell you I was the protector. Heaven forbid someone picked on or bullied one of my friends. That would not happen. We weren't going to allow that. And so I think it just fueled the fire even more, as they were saying, don't be seen and don't be heard. And I think what a sad life, because a sad life that people deserve to be heard. And then I entered into a career where there was so much domestic violence and sexual assault, and the worst of the worst in our community or in our society. I was privileged or privy to that information. So it was an honor being able to help fight for these victims, make sure that they had their day in court, make sure that they were able to face their aggressor or the person that wronged them, and to be able to give them hope and to believe in themselves and get them on a different path. So it wasn't just about, let's say when I was an investigator, it wasn't just about helping domestic violence women or victims or children that were abused. I see many of my people that I've arrested or that I've touched positively in our community because I'm still in the same community that I policed. So it's touching. People will still reach out to me and talk to me about how I gave them a voice. And one example, if you can believe this, on LinkedIn, I was contacted. This was probably a year ago, I would say. and someone had reached out to me and said, do you remember who I am? And I couldn't remember. You know, I've dealt with thousands and thousands of people throughout my career. And she says, you helped me when I had that domestic situation. You believed in me. You were the only one that believed in me, and you fought for me, and we won in court. And she just went on, and she's like, I now do this, this, and this. If I can, I love research. If I can help you in any way as a speaker, she goes, I'm so excited to see you out there. You know, please let me help you. Let me give back to you. And I was like, this is great, because, you know, I was just treading lightly into this National Speakers Association. What really was, you know, what is National Speakers Association? What is this whole other arena that I wasn't involved in? But my highest honor, I would say, is to really give a voice to the voiceless. And I've been able to continue to do that because all these stories through the years where this victim didn't have a say, or this person was severely abused, or this person was wronged, I can take that to the stage, and it's like their legacy continues, and we give a bigger voice to the other people out in the audience, or maybe people, viewers, you know, like on a podcast or a TV show that's aired. You know, there's so many other people out there that need to hear that there's hope, and there's people out there that will, so to speak, fight for them, and that they're not alone. Does that answer your question?
So I think we
Oh,
just need
yeah.
to frame these as goosebump moments, right? Every episode, there's been some sort of a goosebump moment, right? Multiple times, Traci. Thank you. Oh, it does. Yeah.
Lovely.
What are you excited
Lovely.
about in this next stage as you bring those stories with you now as a professional speaker? You're seeing, you know, I know small groups, large groups, right? All different kinds of industries and backgrounds and pathways, right, of your audiences. What are you excited about for this next stage?
I'm excited to be able to continue giving a voice to people and helping them believe that there's hope. And when I say a voice to the voiceless, there are many that are, think about the workforce and what happened with the pandemic. The pandemic's not the only thing. I mean, if you go back in time in history, we've had other, you know, negative things that have happened around the world that have impacted people severely. And you think about during COVID-19, for example, you know, so many people were locked up in their home. They felt isolated. They felt alone. They didn't have other people. And the reality is there's hope. We are in this together. There's always someone that you can reach out to. And when I talk about, you know, not just personal safety, I'll also talk about psychological safety. So the exciting part is being able, people have reported that I make them feel at ease, and it's been a safe space when I've trained people, whether it's men or women. And it's fun to be able to take those into corporations, organizations, or associations and get that same read where people will really come out of their shell. And so I think of many people working from home, or when they've had to go back to work, they don't feel safe. And what's interesting, and you might be able to relate, is that when I interviewed CEOs and talked to them about their workspaces, typically in American, you know, in the United States, a large population or percentage of our CEOs are white males, right? That's common. And so for what I would hear is people would report they don't feel safe at work. And so the CEO is saying we don't have a safety problem at work, but yet people of color, they'll report that their voice is not heard. They don't feel seen, and that's their safety. And the CEOs are like, what do you mean this place is not safe? Because they're thinking of physical safety. In many people, it's the psychological safety. So I think that has come to the forefront, you know, especially since COVID.
Absolutely. And you know,
Yeah.
I was just having a sort of an inward chuckle. Actually, I had an outward chuckle. If you're watching on video, you're going to see the outward chuckle. The voices that go, what do you mean we're not safe? Those are the very fear-inducing voices that we need to start combating and quieting down and working with, right, to get to the psychological safety. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And that's going to be an exciting piece. You know, I really look forward to, with the high stakes leadership, you know, I'm helping people make better decisions faster. That's the goal, not in haste, but more effective decisions. And it can be high stress or high stakes. It doesn't have to necessarily be an environment, because you'll talk to people and they'll say, I go to work and I have this environment that you wouldn't necessarily quote it as if I'm an administrative assistant. It's not a high stress or high stakes environment. Environment is the key word. You know, they'll say, I have a lot of stress and this is why. and they'll share with me. So that is what's really been fun, to be able to not only give a voice to some of these people by telling their stories that I've had for years, but also being able to give people hope and tell or share their stories in a work setting, moving forward.
I also, one of the things I've just really appreciated about you, Traci, and what you're bringing to the rest of us is I've heard you speak, right? You did that for your audiences and just how you've grown that. And I've just seen that in your volunteerism too, right? What you continue to contribute back to the professional speakers environment in your role with Black NSA and the Rainbow Speakers as how can I support you? Like, what do you need? Right. And you show up for people and then listen and ask them what they need and receive that response. And then you go to work, right? You do whatever that work is. And I'm just grateful that you're part of this larger community and that you're taking it even further to not only speakers, but to so many different kinds of audiences. Well, we have been asking each guest a final question, and that is, what is one question you wish we would have asked? And how would you answer that question that we haven't asked?
Oh, that's a toughie. I would say let's go back in time as far as a question. Let me think about this. A question I wish you would have asked. So let's go to our senior citizens. Our senior citizens, many people think of children and they protect children. And so when I came into police work, we had great laws on the books to protect children that were being abused and women. Our domestic laws had changed. Our domestic violence laws had changed in about 1993 is when we really started getting strong momentum in the United States. And so I think about the progress that we've made, but we have not done the same. So we have children on one end of the spectrum that are vulnerable, but we haven't done the same for our senior citizens. And it boggles me why the United States is about the only place that kicks our seniors to the curb. And I don't understand why that is, because there's so much wisdom to share. So that has been another high honor throughout my career, is that back in 2000, I had rolled out many initiatives to be able to protect our senior citizens, help keep them in their home, remain living independently. So some of the behind the scenes things that I'm still doing, it'll be my 24th year this year. I would often get sent on night shift. You see the worst of the worst, truly. And so we get called maybe to a home for a homicide or a domestic violence situation. And when you get in the home, you realize, oh, grandma's here or grandpa's here. They're subject to this drug dealing and the other negative things that are going on, and they're wheelchair bound. They can't get out. They're not getting fed. There's no food in the fridge. And so they're not getting medications. And so that really, really, struck a chord with me, because I was raised by my grandparents in such a loving family. And if we can't take care of our seniors, I call it the greatest generation. If we can't take care of the people that we rode on their shoulders, we have a serious, serious problem. And many other countries are good at this. They respect their elders, they'll listen to them, they put them on a high pedestal. And so that has been my honor to also serve and protect them. And so when I say my 24th year, in 2000, we thought, how can we help some of these indigent homebound senior citizens who don't have other resources? And we put together 20 paper grocery bags, and we had 3 crocheted items from some of these other senior citizens that would, take their yarn and start crocheting early on. And we had 20 bags that we put out, 20 with 3 items in it. It wasn't much. And so it sparked, like, how can we do better? How can we do more? We had to fundraise. We fundraised for several years. And in 2008, I started building or forming a team, kind of like we do at NSA or GSS, where we'll form our chapters and our teams. And I put together a very strong team of volunteers, an attorney that did our bylaws, and a CPA that, went through our books and got those situated. But we raised money so that we could roll out 200 totes of supplies or necessities. And I should say, we put together these totes, but they went out to 200 indigent homebound senior citizens in 5 counties wide. And we delivered them in patrol cars and fire trucks. So it was our first responders. We started out with that. And today we've grown to 400, we've more than doubled. And we will roll those out on December 11th. We will have every year it's in December. It's typically the second week of December at some point, and we get all of our community involved. So it is the largest police and fire charity we have in the state of Michigan, and we will roll out those. So if anybody's interested in seeing what it's about, on my LinkedIn, you can go to my name, Traci Ruiz, on LinkedIn, and you'll see some of the videos there. And it's just a convoy. You know, when you think of semi trucks in a convoy, these are police cars and fire, apparatuses. So whether it's a fire truck or whether it's, your ambulance, it's a whole convoy, and we roll out into the community for these people that don't have hope really. And we'll get like a 4-pack of toilet paper, and we'll have 1 roll of paper towel. And they're actually rationing these products to try to make it throughout the year. It's really sad, that you see that go on, but that was one of many ways that I've been able to make a difference in the community for our seniors, as well as fight for legislative changes and get bills, so they have better rights and protection. So that I'm most excited about. So thank you, Celina, for bringing it up, because that is some of the side, that is the volunteer work. That is not the for-profit, that is the not-for-profit.
Traci, I love
And
this message of
yeah.
hope that has come through. I almost feel like hope has been the theme of our conversation today. So I'm going to give you one last very short, very sharp question in closing on the subject of hope. If you could give one piece of advice to your earlier speaker self, what would it be?
Well, of course, we always can say it's easy to Monday morning quarterback, we call it, or hindsight's 2020, right? And when you get into the speaker arena, people will say, "Oh, you need to have a demo reel, you need to have a branding, you need to have all this stuff." And everywhere you turn, it's very expensive. And so no one thinks, "Oh, you have to have a book." Well, if you're just getting started, you don't have a book, maybe. And so I wished, if someone came to me now and said, "I'm considering a speaking business. I would like to be speaking. What's the first thing I need to do?" And I remember many people said, "There's not a first. You need to do all this stuff." And the reality is I wish someone would have told me to do a branding kit first. I would say that's the most important piece, because you need to gain that clarity of what is your mission? How do you want to serve? Put that into a package, and it makes everything else so much easier, like the branding photos in your demo reel. So that's what I wished I would have known the early speaker is. And there are some extremely talented people that know how to do branding kits and help you with your brand. So for our viewers watching, there's hope. And I know we're probably not supposed to put a plug for people, so I'll hold that. But if someone needs a branding person, I can guide you in the right direction, because we have some amazing people in
Great
our
ones out
speaker.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And I
So
love the
thank
thing
you.
behind that of knowing who you are and what you want to serve on, right? That identity is what comes with that branding kit. And I know at least I know in my own professional background, that would have been better earlier, right? There was, and I think that's a great piece of advice to bring this together on. Thank you so much, Traci, for offering us your time today, your insights, your passion around this. Chantelle, other closing comments?
A reminder to all of us to be the voice to the voiceless, to bring hope, and to just bring our authentic selves to stage, I think.
Perfectly summarized, as always. Thank you all for tuning in, whether you're watching this video or you're listening to us on platforms that carry podcasts. It has been an absolute pleasure for both Chantelle and I to represent Virtual Speakers Association International in these conversations of unpolished stories, speaking beyond the spotlight. If you'd like to know more about this or VSAI, please reach out to either one of us and check out our guest today, Traci Ruiz, on LinkedIn, and her points of contact as well, so that you can see more about what she's going to be doing in the future. Take care and be well.
Thank you, ladies.